Check it out. It's the Laugh to Learn podcast.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the Laugh to Learn podcast, your weekly source for a comedic spin on all the goings-on in the world. My name is, as always, Jacob Paveo, and I come to you from the Great White North every Tuesday evening, and let me tell you, we are getting slammed by snow. I know I called it out a few weeks ago that, maybe the snow's melting. Hell no. 25 centimeters of snow, which is just shy of a foot. That's what we're supposed to get tonight. We'll see. We shall see. But it's not here yet, so it's time to record. That comes to you, of course, as I said, Tuesday evening Eastern Standard Time, fresh for download every single week to listen to at work, on Wednesday morning, while you're driving in, while you're sitting at your desk, while you're driving home, or any time thereafter, because it stays online literally forever. For anyone around the world. Doesn't matter where you are. You're going on vacation. Don't worry, bring me with you. Bring me with you. Please, if you're going on vacation, bring the Laugh to Learn podcast with you. This podcast comes to you completely ad-free, and all that I ask is you subscribe on any podcasting platform you happen to be using and come back each and every week. Don't forget to tell your friends about us, either in person or with a share over on social media. Also, if you have a second, please go rate us 5 stars over on Apple Podcast because it is a great help to us. Any podcast service, actually. It doesn't even have to be Apple. Whatever you choose. But if you can rate us 5 stars, rate us 5 stars. You know what I'm saying? Whatever the rating is. If it's out of 10, make it a 10. If it's out of 100, make it 100. You know what? Even if it's out of 5, give it a 10. You know what I'm saying? 2 5-star ratings. That would be fantastic. It helps us grow. It helps us show up higher in search engines. And, helps people click on it to find out all about how fantastic this show really is. We only have one more episode this year, and that is because after that, Tuesday is Christmas Eve, and I am too busy to put up an episode on Christmas Eve, and the week after that is New Year's Eve, and to be honest with you, I'm going to be drinking. But I also don't think really that a lot of people are going to have time to be listening to podcasts for those 2 weeks, so we're going to take 2 weeks off. I have one more episode after this. Episode 43 will be out this year next Tuesday. I'm hoping. Had a scheduling conflict that I should have foreseen, but I did not. I'm interviewing a marijuana expert, so I can't expect timeliness. You know what I'm saying? Because if you enjoy the devil's lettuce, sometimes it makes you late. But I would like to thank you all for sticking with me this year. If you haven't listened to old episodes, grab just 2 old episodes. That way you can listen continuously. I'm going to be posting some old episodes over those weeks that I like, that I think other people should check out. And it's a great time. Spend time with your friends and family. I mean, it's like Christmas and New Year's. You don't need to be listening to podcasts and hiding away in your corner. Although if you do, and you choose the Laugh to Learn podcast, I appreciate you. Also, I'm getting ready to kind of pivot to a bit of a lighter show next year. Numbers show that people don't like the heavier episodes. So the more political and in-depth it is, the less people listen. So I got it. I'm going to change it up a little bit, and we're going to come in hot. Also, be safe. If you live where it snows. If you live where it's sunny, be safe as well. But, you don't have snow on the ground that could kill you. So be safe out there, folks. I don't need to lose a listener because they were unsafe. You know what I'm saying? If I lose a listener because I say something unsafe and unsavory, then I can accept that. But I don't want to be losing no listeners to the grave because of the snow. Also, I'm going to be closing the show today with some plans in my own life that I think you might like. I know it's not a New Year's resolution, but it's some dieting plans I have that maybe you'll be interested in. But I saved it for the end, so if you get there, I'm going to tell you when it comes up, and you can be like, don't care, end the episode there. That's totally cool with me. But I think now I've rambled on enough, and we should get to it, because this is going to be the last scripted episode of the year. Of course, don't forget, come back next week, because I'm going to have my interview, but this is going to be the last scripted episode of the year, which is crazy that we're here. Episode 42. Oh my God. Let's get to it. To round off last week's episode on impeachment, in the past week, the House Democrats down in the United States of America have filed official articles of impeachment to come up for vote in the House. He being Donald Trump, has been charged with abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. So surprisingly, there was nothing to do directly with holding those funds, but technically the abuse of power could be to deal with withholding military funding and military aid to the Ukraine, and the obstruction of Congress comes with essentially refusing multiple federal subpoenas, refusing to appear after being issued with multiple federal subpoenas. The latter charge is one that we didn't discuss last week, so I'm going to cover it quickly right now. So several White House officials have been advised by presidential attorneys to not respond to subpoenas issued by the House for questioning in the impeachment inquiry. A subpoena, if you don't know, is a legal document which forces you to appear in court on a given date. If you or I were to ignore one, we would immediately have warrants issued for our arrest, and after being arrested, we would be brought to the courtroom to testify or whatever they needed us there for, and then we would be processed and charged with contempt of court. For some reason, most staff members that have been issued a subpoena have opted to ignore it altogether, and this is raising many legal questions because they haven't been arrested, and really nothing has happened. So unfortunately, they're now in an appeal process, and those appeals will take several years, and some of these individuals may in fact find themselves in jail eventually. It's totally possible, but it would most likely, almost certainly be either after or very late into Trump's second term, assuming he wins. This means that any information they are holding and that the House wanted to use in the impeachment inquiry will be meaningless, as the impeachment case will be long over by the time that they actually see the inside of a courtroom. So it's definitely an interesting situation, and a lot of people, a lot of experts really don't know what to think about it. It's kind of complicated, right? So you have the White House who are directly telling their staff members not to follow a subpoena, and they are challenging the fact that it is a political subpoena and not for a federal crime. So there is no federal crime that's being challenged. So the White House is saying they don't need to respond. So far, at least it seems like the courts are at least agreeing with the White House and the police also, because no one has been arrested. Which is a very interesting thing that we've never seen before, because even Bill Clinton was subpoenaed as president and talked at his impeachment inquiry. So, yeah, I really don't know what's going to happen with this one. It's just one example of obstruction of Congress. They have other things they can use. But as I said last week, I want to be very clear that I think Trump is completely guilty of these charges that have been placed against him. It seems kind of obvious, and by all that I understand about the wording of the Constitution of the United States, I'm not an American. I'm certainly not a historian or a constitutional expert. But by what I understand, it seems like he should be removed from office. Like, it seems like both the House and the Senate should get him out. However, I remain a firm believer that the House will impeach and the Senate will not, and he will stay in office, and the momentum that he'll gain from a failed impeachment will progress him far enough to secure a second term in the election next fall. More conversation on Trump, kind of, but this is a more Mean Girls mood. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was caught on a hot mic gossiping in Buckingham Palace with English Prime Minister Boris Johnson, French President Emmanuel Macron, Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte, and Princess Anne of England, just to round out that fantastic group. Wouldn't that be an interesting conversation to be a part of? The group, directed in conversation by Trudeau, were laughing at Trump's impromptu and exceedingly long 2 press conferences before the G7 meetings had begun. These 2 meetings were first with Macron, who was scheduled to be in a 10-minute meeting in front of the cameras, and it ended up being, thanks to Trump, a 40-minute heated debate between the two in front of the cameras. And the second of these meetings that ended up extending was scheduled to be a 15-minute meeting in front of cameras with Trudeau, both with Macron and Trudeau. It was supposed to be, shake a hand, talk a little bit, answer 1 or 2 questions, and bounce. Trudeau's 15-minute meeting evolved into a half-hour press conference, culminating in the unscheduled announcement that the G7 summit in 2020 would take place at Camp David. Now, quite famously, recently, Trump announced that the G7 summit would take place at Mar-a-Lago, and tons of American politicians said, hell no, you cannot do that. You can't bring all these people from around the world, these 7 leaders, to your own resort and profit off it. So we didn't know where it was going to be, and Trump just out of nowhere announced Camp David. But what makes it even more interesting is Camp David is a place which up until now has, by what I can tell, only been visited by other nations on 2 occasions. So there's been one G8 summit there before, going back several decades, and the other was a meeting with, I believe it was a Japanese prime minister met there. But Camp David is very secret, and the reason that it's not really used for these sort of things is it's a major American military base, is what I'm trying to say. And it's also the home to the regular vacation spot for presidents. So most presidents vacation at Camp David. It's a very nice place. There's some photos of it. It's very secretive because it's a base. But you can hear, like, Clinton talked about it. Hillary Clinton talked about it on, I think it was Howard Stern's show recently, where she just said, yeah, it's nice. It's a beautiful place, a nice resort property, nothing over the top, and ultimately it's a military base. So, but either way, it's a big deal that Trump made that announcement out of nowhere. It even took Justin Trudeau by surprise. So, yeah, that was quite interesting. I would play the clip, but it was recorded from quite a distance away, so it's very muffled. I tried to edit it, but it doesn't really come out that you can hear what he's saying. Essentially, you can hear him talking about how irritating it is that everyone was late to get to this banquet because Trump had these 2 extremely extended press conferences. And then he goes on to mention how his entire team's jaws dropped on the floor when he made the Camp David announcement. He quite clearly says the team's jaws dropped on the floor. A lot of it has been interpreted. You can kind of read his lips in between what's being said, but the microphone was very far away, so it's hard to tell exactly what was going on. But you can get the gist of it. If you watch it online, they have it subtitled, and it seems pretty accurate. But the following day, in typical Trump style, he then had a strange interaction and then got caught on a hot mic, of course. So I'm not going to play this clip as well for the same reason, but he was interviewed with the German Chancellor. They were doing a press conference, and someone directly asked him about Justin Trudeau, to which he said that Trudeau was two-faced. So, typical Trump answer, but then right away he says he's two-faced, but I like the guy. He's a nice guy, he's a great guy, but, he's two-faced. So, moving on from that, he finishes the press conference with the prime minister of Germany. What is she? Angela Merkel. I think she's like a prime minister. I should know this, but I don't. Either way, it was Angela Merkel he's talking with, and as he's walking away, he was picked up on a hot mic saying, quote, "That was funny when I said that the guy's two-faced. You know that, right?" And this he said to his press secretary, who in turn, she turns to him and said, "Sir, you knew what you were doing, didn't you, sir?" And he simply smiled in response. Ultimately, I really don't think this goes anywhere. I don't think this is a big deal. Both of them have had press conferences since then that they've just kind of rushed it off. I think this is kind of a typical part of politics. It's a typical part of business. You know that your competitive rivals sort of are talking about you behind your back. It's expected almost. It's not even really dirty. It's just like, a bunch of world leaders together talking shit about some other world leader. That's typical. I don't think that there's anything really to read into this. I know there have been a lot of articles put out reading, especially from the Canadian side, which I find odd, reading deeply into this, that this could affect, relations and this might change things. But today, Canada, the U.S., and Mexico signed a new trade deal that took over for NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. So we now have a new trade deal in place. I'm not really sure what they're going to call it, but they had signed a temporary one, then the U.S. didn't like it and tore it up, and now they signed a third one. So, or I guess a second new one, but a third one in total. So it seems like politically Canada and the U.S. are doing just fine. There's no real reason for it to escalate. But I just thought it was absolutely hilarious that Trudeau is standing in a circle with these world leaders and Princess Anne, who is like in her late 70s, standing there holding her little purse, just talking shit about Trump in Buckingham Palace. Either way, I thought that was enjoyable, and I thought that everyone would want to hear it. How about we bring back a segment called This Week in Stupid? Because there is some funny news to cover that I didn't even have to Google. Usually I have to search through some funny news websites. This was straight up just in the news that I thought was absolutely hilarious. So let's start with a Canadian man diagnosed with a brain tumor while in vacation in Thailand. Trouble in paradise. He has had his traveler's health insurance denied because he had the flu a month ago. The insurers have denied him the ability to move his flight to an earlier date so he could seek treatment because of this prior condition. Again, that prior condition was the flu. But worry not, in typical 2019 fashion, a GoFundMe page has been started and has raised over $50,000 for him to get home with in one day. Lucky for his wife, that check will be mailed out in 6 to 8 weeks. Only a few decades after her Nobel Peace Prize for bringing freedom and democracy to Myanmar, Aung San Suu Kyi is before the International Court of Justice facing charges of genocide against a Muslim sect in her home country. Maybe we should look at returning that Nobel Peace Prize. And there's no word yet on when Barack Obama will begin to decapitate white people. For some reason, Bill Cosby filed an appeal against his sexual assault conviction, which came up in court this week. Shockingly, the most prolific serial rapist of all time was allowed to remain in jail for the rest of his term because roughly 20 women testified again at this appeals trial that he drugged and raped them. I'm starting to believe that Cosby just likes hearing people retell the story. Finally, this Friday is the Geminids meteor shower, which is the most prolific of the year. Starting around 11 p.m., for those of us up north, it is a great way to freeze your ass off outside while watching large space rock burn in our upper atmosphere. Thank you all for checking the podcast out this week. Don't forget to subscribe and share it with your friends and family. Tell them all about it. Tell them all about the might, the the power, and the glory. Mention it at work and make sure they know about the incredible amount of content that's available completely ad-free each and every Tuesday evening Eastern Standard Time. As always, thank you for all of your support. And feel free to reach out to me absolutely anytime over on social media or at www.laughtolearnpodcast.com. All of the social media links can be found in the description for this episode on your favorite podcasting platform of choice. Speaking of which, don't forget to look and see if you can give us a 5-star rating and a dope-ass review on the platform you choose to listen to, because that would help tons of other people find our episodes and our podcast that maybe you don't know. So you share it with your friends, you tell your buddy at work about it, and then you give us a 5-star rating, and you just brought 3 new people to the podcast this week. So thank you all very much. And now, back to the episode. Russia. I think I'm having deja vu because the Russian Federation is once again facing another 4-year ban from all international sports competition. The World Anti-Doping Association, better known as WADA, has announced the decision this week after a new round of investigations concluded into the country's supplement practices. The country is now facing a ban from Tokyo 2020 and Beijing 2022. Side note, when the hell did we decide to go back to Beijing for the Olympics? We were literally there like 10 years ago. It was 2008, wasn't it, in Beijing? Like, what are we already going back there for? And why are we as a nation supporting China? So many questions. This would also rule Russia out of the World Cup and any other WADA-based competition. It's important to note for anyone who is fans of fighting, USADA is in control of the UFC, and that's the U.S. Anti-Doping Association, and most fighting associations in North America. However, when they fight internationally, they use WADA, but WADA has announced that they will allow athletes not named in the case to compete. So it shouldn't have any real impact on professional competitions and stuff, because this is specifically a Russian government campaign targeted towards the Olympics and winning major sporting events like that. WADA has announced that they've found inconsistencies in the documents the Russian anti-doping agency has kept, and it has become evident that someone altered or deleted thousands of entries regarding athlete drug tests. So the documentation created from the tests themselves has either been deleted or altered, and it is quite obvious that it was done so. So obvious that this time it was actually confirmed by the leader of Russia's anti-doping agency. So the last time this happened, the Russian anti-doping agency said that it wasn't true and it didn't happen. Now they're like, yeah, it happened, which means it has to be blatant. It's got to be pretty obvious that it happened, and it's it's unfortunate. But it looks like we will have the same result as we saw in the last Olympic Games in Pyeongchang, where athletes who were not directly named in the case will be allowed to compete. As I said, just like in other avenues and in professional sports, they'll be allowed to compete. But if you are Russian, you must do so as, quote, Olympic athletes from Russia, flying the Olympic flag instead of the Russian flag. It's similar to those who don't compete for any one country, which we sometimes see in the Olympics, although generally this is due to war or political distress. I think, honestly, that this is kind of dumb. It's strange how we're here again. This is the second time that they've been suspended. Clearly, the first time had no impact, like allowing all of their athletes to still compete, but you're just not flying the Russian flag. I understand you don't want to damage the careers and the potentials of these young athletes who they haven't cheated, and just because they live and compete for a nation that chose to cheat doesn't mean that they should be punished, right? They're still young athletes who this may be their one opportunity to really make a name for themselves, make some money, maybe they get advertising opportunities and stuff like that. It's a big deal to show up in the Olympics, and if you do well especially. So it can be a really big deal for some of these young athletes. And I don't think we should punish them by saying they can't compete, but allowing them to come and compete as athletes from Russia is like, you might as well just not do anything, right? You might as well just not do anything, because everyone knows you're Russian. It says it right in the title that you're an athlete from Russia. So how are you punishing Russia in any way, really, other than the fact that the ones who were cheating now won't be able to compete, which I completely agree with. Like, if you're caught doping when you're not allowed to dope, you shouldn't be allowed to compete. That's simple. But it's what you do with everyone else that gets kind of complicated. Personally, I think they should be competing under the Olympic flag as simply Olympians. You don't need to be from anywhere. I think it's strange that you require them to be from a nation. Like, no. Your nation is not allowed to compete. If you want to compete, you can compete as an Olympic athlete, OA. Because that's what they do with people who, like I was talking about earlier, they're from countries that are at war or something, or they're not politically recognized as nations. You compete as an Olympic athlete, OA, under the Olympic flag. They always walk out at the end of the ceremonies, and I don't know that anyone's ever really done very well that's competed like that, but nonetheless, we allow them to compete, right? The Olympic Committee allows them to compete because, you know, maybe your government got overthrown or something recently, and it's like you're a fantastic sprinter or swimmer or snowboarder or something like that, and suddenly you have no nation. Does that mean like the Olympics are like, nope, sorry, you can't compete? No, you compete for the Olympics as an Olympic athlete, and you should be able to compete just as an Olympic athlete. Not an Olympic athlete from Russia. OAR is what they were calling them in Pyeongchang, and I really don't like it. Ultimately, this is basically a case where no one who wasn't cheating gets hurt in any way by the ruling, but I think it's kind of pathetic that they don't fly the flag and operate as athletes from Russia. Like, it's just, what kind of punishment is it? It's a half measure to make people feel like the millions that WADA makes are actually going towards something useful. Instead, what I really think they should do is allow Russia to host a doped-up Olympic Games this time. For real, let's see someone run the 100-meter dash in like 8 seconds flat in Moscow next year. My apologies if my voice is off. My throat started really bothering me in that last segment. Either way, I've come to my plan for next year. So if you don't want to hear about dieting and shit like that, you can turn it off. It's a half-hour episode. Not too shabby for the last one of the year. Honestly, I've already started working on stuff for next year. I'm that kind of person. So I wanted to kind of keep this one light. You may have noticed I threw in more jokes than I have been lately, but I really want to get back, as I've said a few times, into the comedic aspect and the interview aspect of this show. They're the two things I enjoy the most. So that's what you can expect more of next year. But it's still this year, so I told you that I'd be talking about my new plan, and as many of you have probably sorted out through Sober October and really the entire time that you've listened to the show, if it's more than, 4 or 5 episodes, you may have realized that I do some big changes to like diet and lifestyle fairly regularly, and I'm working on my big plan for next year. So the reason that I change them up is, honestly, I just test different things out. Sometimes I get bored. I'm like, let's try that. So I've still not been able to work out properly since my hip injury at the end of October. It's still fairly painful, but it's getting closer. So first and foremost, I'm looking forward to getting back into the swing of a regular workout routine. And I encourage anyone if you're feeling tired throughout the day, either at work or at school, or if you're struggling to get out and do stuff, or even to get things done around the house, I find by getting into a gym, it doesn't have to be a gym, but a workout routine, it always makes it a little easier for me and helps motivate me to do more positive things with my time. So I really encourage that. But second to working out, I've never really talked about diet on this show, but that's probably going to change going into next year. I'm working on a new diet right now. I'm putting it together to start next year with a goal. We'll see. But right now it's a goal of roughly 85% plant-based calories. Yes, I was listening to the documentary, which I can't remember the name of. I want to say Game Changers, but I don't think that was it. But I also listened to 6 hours of debate on the Joe Rogan podcast about this diet. And as such, I've decided to try and give a similar version of it a go. In June, July, and September this year, I skipped August. I removed refined sugar from my diet completely and felt fantastic. Now, the plan is going to be to expand on that. The reason I stopped was I got into Sober October, and I was like carbing it up and eating pastas and stuff like that. So when you're running for 4 or 5 hours a day on a treadmill, I was not concerned with what I was eating. I was shoving everything into my mouth. That came out wrong. Now, don't worry, because I still work in the meat industry, and I'm not going vegan or vegetarian, but I will be the first one to tell you guys if I do, and I'll be sure to remind you every 10 minutes or so during the podcast. So you can look forward to that if I do decide to go vegetarian or specifically vegan. Also, this isn't a New Year's resolution. I don't really do those, as I mentioned at the top of the show. This is like a 1 month change to see if I like it or not. It's the sort of thing I'm going to talk about it, tell people how I feel about it, if I think you guys should try it or not. It's just personally, I don't like resolutions, because if I want to make a change, I do it right away. Like, if you're planning on making a New Year's resolution, just start tomorrow. Like, if you want to start going back to the gym, go tomorrow. Like, just do it. The only real reason for me to start my diet in January is I want to eat that good Christmas food. But, for me, it's not so much about like a long-term goal for the year. Oh, I'm going to eat healthier. No, like, I already eat very, very healthy. But it's just a more specific diet that I want to follow and see how it makes me feel. Also, it's going to be strange because, like I said, I literally haven't worked out properly since my last hockey game was November 2nd. And that's the day that my hip was really screwed up and I got a high stick to the face. Oh, no, that was actually the game after the high stick. So the high stick was November 2nd, so it would have been 2 days later because it was playoffs. That's the reason I know that off the top of my head. So it was November 4th was the last hockey game that I played. So since then, I really haven't been able to do any proper workouts and stuff, yoga and whatnot, but not like a real hard workout. So I'm curious to see how my body reacts when I start working out heavily along the same period that I do this diet change. It could be a bit of a shock to the system, but I'm really looking forward to it. Lastly, I want to say that we are quickly approaching our 1-year anniversary with the Laugh to Learn podcast. So I got a notification already to renew my my websites and my podcast domains and everything for next year, which is crazy. It's absolutely crazy that we're almost at a year. So next month, you'll hear me talk a lot more about the plans for our 1-year special. I want to do something fun. I'm hoping to get a really high download count on it because I want to just do something exciting. So I'm trying to figure out what I want to do. I want to bring in some something cool. Like, I don't know. I don't really know yet. I have some ideas, but you'll definitely hear me talk a lot more about that show. But that's something to look forward to. That's going to be towards the end of or the middle of February. I think it was the second or third week of February that I launched the show. So, I'm hoping to make it great, and I hope that you guys enjoyed this. Like I said, this was my last scripted episode of the year. I'm going to have a much longer interview episode posted for next Tuesday. That's the plan right now. Again, no matter what, it's going to post next week, but we're just sorting out when we can get together. So I'm hoping that it'll be done and ready to go for Tuesday. Check out my social media if there's any delays. And then after that, and I'll remind you next week, I'm going to be off because it's the Tuesdays after that are Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. So get out there, live your lives. As far as scripted episodes go, I hope you guys enjoyed this, the first calendar year of the Laugh to Learn podcast. Please get out and share it with your friends. I'm going to throw in the thing at the end where I remind you all of what to do and where to find me. But truly, thank you for sticking with me through this calendar year. I hope you enjoy the interview next week. I'm really looking forward to it. Let me know what you guys want to see with the show, what you like about it, what you don't like about it. Just hit me up and let me know, because I'm always down for making improvements and changes for you guys. And yeah, thank you guys very much. And I'm going to cue the end of the show. Thank you all for tuning in to the very end and for listening to the entire episode. As always, I really, really encourage you to take the discussions had here today outside into the real world with your friends and family, or with me over on Twitter, Instagram, or of course using the contact page at www.laughtolearnpodcast.com. As always, this podcast is completely ad-free, and I'll ask as you're sharing it with your friends and family every week, subscribing on your podcasting app, and giving us 5-star ratings. Until next time, everyone, I hope you keep your heads up. I hope your wallets are full I hope your taxes to pay are low. And I encourage you all to keep on laughing and keep on learning.